The helicopter went down inside the volcano. Not near it. Not on the slopes of it. Inside it. Into the crater of Kilauea, one of the most active volcanoes on Earth. A geological structure that has been producing lava continuously since 1983, that contains within its caldera an environment of sulfur dioxide gas, extreme heat, and molten rock that exists at temperatures no living thing is designed to survive. The engine failed at the worst possible moment above the worst possible place. Benson and Chris Duddy were part of a Hollywood film crew that had been documenting the volcano from the air. They were professionals working in a dangerous location with the equipment and protocols that professional aerial filmmaking requires. None of that changed what happened when the engine stopped. The helicopter fell into Kilauea. They disappeared into the gas and the smoke and the heat, and from the surface. From the people who watched the aircraft go down and then saw nothing, because the crater's toxic atmosphere absorbed the wreckage and the men into something that produced no visible sign of what it had swallowed. They were gone. For 2 days, nobody knew if there was anything left to find. What happened inside that volcano in the 2 days that followed the crash is one of the least documented survival stories in this series. Not because it is less true, but because the environment it happened in does not permit the kind of detailed recording that other survival situations sometimes produce. What exists is the account of 2 men who went into a volcanic crater and came back out, and the specific details of what that required. This is the Unlost Files. And this is the true story of Benson and Chris Duddy. Kilauea sits on the big island of Hawaii, on the southeastern flank of the larger shield volcano Mauna Loa. It is not a volcano in the cinematic sense. It does not produce the dramatic explosive eruptions that the word volcano tends to summon. What it produces is continuous. Since January of 1983, Kilauea has been in a state of essentially uninterrupted effusive eruption, generating lava flows that have, over the decades, added hundreds of acres of new land to the island's coastline and destroyed hundreds of homes and structures in their path. The crater environment that this continuous activity produces is not simply hot. It is chemically hostile in ways that heat alone does not convey. Sulfur dioxide, the gas produced when sulfur-containing compounds in magma are released during eruption, accumulates in the caldera and in the lower sections of the crater walls in concentrations that, at sufficient levels, are immediately dangerous to human respiratory systems. The visible steam and haze that makes Kilauea's crater photogenic from a distance is, up close, a mixture of water vapor, carbon dioxide, sulfur dioxide, and hydrogen sulfide that the Hawaiian Volcano Observatory refers to as volcanic smog (VOG), and that at crater-level concentrations causes immediate eye and throat irritation, respiratory distress, and at sustained exposure, incapacitation. The visibility inside the crater is not simply poor. It is the specific visibility of an environment that actively produces obscuring gases, not fog in the meteorological sense, but a chemical haze that thickens and thins with the volcanic activity below it, that carries no consistent direction because the heat convection inside the caldera creates its own air movement, and that deposits sulfur compounds on every surface it touches, including the lungs of any person breathing it without protection. In 1992, a film crew was documenting this environment from the air. The aircraft they were using was a helicopter, the standard platform for aerial documentary work over terrain that does not permit fixed-wing approaches. Helicopter operations over active volcanic terrain carry specific risks that the aviation community documents carefully. The thermal columns rising from the caldera can produce sudden and severe turbulence. The corrosive atmosphere accelerates mechanical wear on aircraft systems, and the visual conditions that make the crater photogenic also reduce the reliability of visual navigation and obstacle avoidance. When the engine of the helicopter carrying Michael Benson and Chris Duddy failed above the caldera, the aircraft went where gravity and the caldera's geometry directed it. It went in. The crater floor of Kilauea's caldera is not stable ground. It is the surface expression of an active magma system, cracked, dynamic, shifting with the pressure changes in the lava lake below it. In sections, it is solid enough to support weight. In others, it is a thin crust over void, over lava tubes, over channels of moving molten rock that the surface does not reveal until it fails. Walking on the floor of an active caldera requires the specific attention of someone who understands that the ground they are walking on is not a fixed surface but a variable one, and that the assessment they make of a particular section's stability may be accurate for the moment and inaccurate for the moment after. Michael Benson and Chris Duddy survived the crash. The helicopter came down in a way that was survivable, not gently, not without injury, but in a way that left 2 living people inside a volcanic crater with the wreckage of their aircraft and the specific problem set of their situation assembling itself around them. The problem set was severe. They were inside an active caldera. The gas concentration at ground level in the caldera was higher than at altitude, heavier than air, sulfur dioxide settles into low points, and the bottom of a volcanic crater is the lowest point in its geography. They had no communication equipment functional after the crash. The visual conditions around them, the VOG and the steam and the heat shimmer from the lava activity below, reduced their effective visibility to meters in most directions. The crater walls above them were not vertical but were not easily climbable. The rock of a volcanic caldera is not the stable, solid climbing surface that outdoor experience typically provides. It is fractured, loose in places, depositing sulfur compounds on any surface a hand or foot might trust with weight. The temperature at ground level in the caldera was not the surface temperature of active lava. They were not in immediate contact with the molten rock. They were in the radiant heat environment of a space that contains molten rock below its floor, in an atmosphere that the geological activity below was continuously heating and chemically altering. They could not stay where they were. They began to look for a way up. The walls of Kilauea's caldera drop approximately 100 meters from the crater rim to the floor, not uniformly, not with the clean geometry of a constructed space, but with the irregular, broken topography of a geological formation that has been produced by collapse and eruption and collapse again over centuries. There are sections where the wall is more manageable and sections where it is not, and identifying the former from the latter in conditions of poor visibility and physical duress is the kind of assessment that a person makes with the information available to them, which in this case was limited. They climbed. What this climbing involved, in the specific context of 2 people with crash injuries, in volcanic gas concentrations that were affecting their respiratory function with every breath, on rock surfaces that deposited sulfur on their hands and shoes and that failed in places without warning, what it involved cannot be described with the precision that a technical climbing account would provide, because the account that exists is the account of 2 people who were managing a situation rather than documenting it. What is documented is that they spent approximately 2 days inside the crater before they were recovered. 2 days in which the volcanic activity around them continued as it always continues, the lava lake below the floor producing heat and gas, the crater walls producing the specific instability of geological formations that are not finished moving, the atmosphere inside the caldera maintaining the chemical composition that makes it hostile to human survival for any sustained period. They moved when movement was possible. They sheltered when it was not. They breathed the air that was available to breathe, the volcanic smog that the caldera produces at ground level, managing the respiratory distress it produced with whatever capacity they had to manage it. The sulfur dioxide that was continuously present in the air they were breathing was causing damage to the tissue of their airways that they could feel in the quality of every breath but could not address. They stayed alive. The search operation on the surface had the specific difficulty of any search that is conducted in an environment that actively resists human presence. Kilauea's caldera is not a place that search and rescue teams can enter and traverse freely. The same conditions that made survival inside it so difficult for Benson and Duddy made the search for them difficult for the people attempting it from above. Aerial observation was the primary tool. Looking into the crater from above, through the VOG and the steam, for any sign that two people were alive in the environment below. The volcanic haze that makes the crater visually impenetrable from ground level is only marginally less impenetrable from altitude. Aircraft operating over the caldera face the same thermal and chemical hazards that had brought the original helicopter down. The 2 days were not a comfortable wait for resolution. They were 2 days in which the people operating the search were conducting it in conditions that gave them limited information, and in which the information they had did not confirm that there was anything alive inside the volcano to find. On the second day, they found them. The rescue method was a net, a cargo net deployed from a helicopter, the same basic technology used to lift equipment in terrain that does not permit landing. Benson and Duddy were lifted out of the crater in the net, pulled up through the VOG and the heat by an aircraft operating in the turbulent, chemically hostile atmosphere above the caldera, in a recovery that the pilots involved have described as among the most technically demanding operations they had conducted. They came up through the smoke. They were alive. The medical condition of Michael Benson and Chris Duddy after their recovery reflected 2 days of what the interior of Kilauea's caldera does to a human body. Respiratory damage from sustained sulfur dioxide exposure. The specific injury that acidic gas produces when it is inhaled continuously over hours and days, damage to the mucous membranes of the airways, inflammation of the lung tissue, the kind of chemical irritation that does not resolve quickly and that the body registers as a sustained assault on its respiratory function. They had been breathing for 2 days an atmosphere that the environment had not designed for breathing. Injuries from the crash itself. The impact of a helicopter going down inside a volcanic crater is not an impact that produces no physical consequences, regardless of the survivability of the outcome. Dehydration, exposure, the accumulated physical cost of 2 days in an environment that was continuously working against every system they had for maintaining homeostasis. They recovered. The story they came back with, the account of 2 days inside an active volcanic crater, of climbing fractured walls and volcanic gas on crash-damaged bodies, of the specific quality of the light and the sound and the heat inside a place that is not designed to contain human beings, is not a story that has received the extensive documentation of other survival events. It happened in 1992, before the era of ubiquitous documentation, inside an environment that had destroyed the equipment that would have recorded it. What exists is the fact of it. 2 people went into Kilauea. 2 people came out. The volcano, which has been in continuous eruption since 1983 and shows no indication of stopping, continued after they left precisely as it had continued before they arrived, producing lava and gas and heat with the indifference of a geological process that operates on timescales that make 2 days, and 2 people very small indeed. They were not small to themselves. That is the whole story. This has been the Unlost Files. Subscribe if you want more. Leave a comment with what stayed with you. I'll see you in the next one.